Hey guys, Frankie TechLord Taylor here. Just turned on the mic um, to do a little talking, and pretty much that's all I'm doing while I'm deving. I'm over here coding the what I call Janelle, which stands for JSON Node Lexer. Um, it's a parsing, um, it's a piece of parsing code based on the Jasmine JSON decoder. And the idea behind that parser is to simply tokenize um, the JSON nodes into objects, arrays, and strings and primitives, which would be numbers, true booleans, and and it's ideal for what I need to do to decode the JSON. Encoding JSON is pretty straightforward. Decoding is a little more tricky when you try to figure out where the braces and commas are being used. So a more intelligent parsing system is needed for that, and that's where Janelle, based on Jasmine, um, is gonna come into play. So the idea behind using JSON was to use a data exchange format to save the data in, so that data could be sent over a network pretty easily and shared between the server and clients, both Unreal Engine 4 server client and HTTP server client or web browser. So it's an easier approach, I think. Once it's in place, and then you just encode the data and send it as strings as needed, or you can save it to a save game object locally as a string. And I think it's also a better way to communicate configurations of entities between the clients. And some thought went into how did I want to approach this, and it's based on some previous experimentation. And I elected to go this route to allow some versatility in the saving mechanism and transferring data across a remote network. So JSON encoding is going to be very, very good for Protos in that regard. So I pretty much took the Jasmine C code and attempted to translate that into blueprints. And I did the translation without any type of testing whatsoever. So just looked at the code and attempted to find a blueprint equivalent and implement or script that in that way. So now we're going through the phase of testing, and there are a billion bugs so far. But we're knocking them out by stepping through the blueprints node by node. So definitely we have in blueprints more features than C itself. So we're going to modify to take advantage of those features, but want to get a working system going so we know what works, and then we'll optimize and modify to use those newer features, programming features from blueprints, once we make sure that it's working. So this once the JSON encoding decoding is available, the save system locally, we're going to be saving on the server with the option to save on a client through a save game object, and that will put complete the first in what we call minimum viable product one. That will complete the first MVP. So if we did decide to try to polish and focus on getting a multi-user construction system, a basic one, not entity level, but more of a map and level architecture type constructor out there, we would have that option to do. I'm really more excited about getting to MVP 2 status. Um, that's going to be dealing with entity construction. Entities being characters, vehicles, weapons, etc. Now, why am I so excited about this? Well, I believe that modular, component based entity construction is what is going to support in-game content management systems. So, I do see in the future that modeling. I think the modeling paradigm now today is actually kind of, it's more of a, you kind of mold the geometry into the look or the entities that you're trying to create. But I think in the future you would have a, pre-designed components, like for, let's say, an organic entity, you would have a base body, and then you add clothes to that base body. Those clothes are, the clothing is, they're separate pieces of geometry, kind of like, Marvelous Designer. You take the 3D mesh, that represents the actor, human, and then you put clothes on it. And that's the way I see that type of modeling approach is what I actually think is better for games. And what I'd like to see happen is that there would be large libraries of parts and garment pieces, etc., that will be created, and you would actually build your 3D entities by assembling them with these parts and pieces. Then you can customize and modify the parts and pieces themselves to give it a unique appearance. But you would start that way, and I believe that would provide a faster way to create 3D entities, and that's going to allow game developers, I believe, the next level of accessibility. So if you don't have modeling skills, not a problem. With a content management system integrated into the game engine itself, you pull in these modular parts and pieces, and of course you have assembly systems. That's what Protos is kind of it is an assembly system, for a content management system. And you would assemble. Now, by exposing these, construction features to the player, and by, slapping on a GUI of some sort, you give the player, the ability to customize and create. And I believe at allowing players to, even if it's not required, let's say that it's a story with prefabricated characters, that would give the developers the ability to prefabricate the characters that are needed easier. You expose this same, construction capability to the player, and you just open up, a world of creativity, that I think is needed. So your game would exist a lot longer, giving the players the ability to customize and mod, kind of sort of mod internally, the assets or the entities that they play in game. And I think that's going to give your game products more life, a longer life, because now what we're competing against, games that are designed for very long play times. And if, it depends on how you release the game. If people are already preoccupied with a list of games already, they're too busy to play your game. So what happens is, it's kind of like seasonal. If you release your game, in the summer, and nobody can get to that game until the winter, well, now your summer game is competing with all the games that are released in the winter, so it may get completely overlooked. And that's where marketing, of course, is going to come into play. You're going to have to really market it hard, in order to get the visibility you need to compete with the rest of the games. And this is where the commercial studios have an advantage. They do have, if you don't have a large amount of capital to invest in marketing, that's where you get beat up. So now I do believe that you can embed marketing into your game. Uh, I personally want to promote affiliate programs. Why not? I mean, encourage players to bring other players into the game. But you need a game that's designed to support that type of persistence. One of the problems with multiplayer games that are all only multiplayer is that eventually the servers don't have a population, and that's the beginning of the end for a multiplayer only game. Let's take the story based games today. One of the challenges would be keeping your game playable after it's been streamed and all of the endings have been played through, and people can just simply watch. And that's becoming more entertaining than watching TV shows, is watching other players play games. So that's a challenge for folks, for developers, if they're developing a commercial title that is single player story based. That is something to take in consideration. Now, how I don't look at it as a problem. What I look at is, how do we monetize that? And that's when I start talking about massive multiplayer spectating. And by managing that, what would be different compared to Twitch? Well, you actually can spectate in game through a client, and you connect. That could be VR support for that. You can also manage it. You could monetize the seating. How many number of spectators are able to actually connect and view the game through a VR headset, and actually be part of that game world. That's something you can monetize. Why? You limit the number of seats. You would have to monitor that anyway, because you're only going to be able to support so many concurrent players anyway. So doing things, looking for innovative ways to monetize, innovative ways to market, I think is where you're going to actually separate your game. I'm not talking about don't make your game unique, but do make your game unique, but also be prepared to integrate the business of the game inside of it. I mean, advertisements allow support advertisers inside of the game world. If let's say, for example, McDonald's. Well, if you have a zombie game, I think in the real world, if there was going to be a zombie apocalypse and you run into a fast food joint that's all run down, why not use something people are really familiar with? So you would actually use McDonald's packaging, and you'd work out a advertisement deal with McDonald's that they're going to have a McDonald's decrepit, beat down, destroyed McDonald's restaurant inside of McDonald's, but it's actually somewhat functional for the players to go in and, hey, there's a McDonald's here, and there's advertisement in that. Bob's Plumbing Service, put logos on some of the broken down vehicles in that world with Bob's logo, plumbing service. And I think that if you put numbers on there that are functional, people are gonna, well, let me call this number and see if it really works. And that's Bob's Plumbing Service getting real live customers calling to find out if it's a real service, and then that's an opportunity to offer products and service to those people. People think, I'm not sure. Children do play games. They play a lot of games, but there are adults playing these games, and adults with surplus cash to spend on other services that will make their lives convenient. So that's something that when I design my games, I am looking at this as a business, and I design the business inside of the game. So, yeah, just talking, nothing in particular here. So I'll probably put another one of these together, just get my ideas out of my head and put them out here into the world, into the cyber existence. Anyway, that I'm just gonna shut it off, and you know